Well, for more, we can speak to our correspondent, Noga Tarnopolsky, at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Hello to you, Noga. Let's begin with the first two men who were released earlier this Saturday. What more can you tell us about them?
Yes, these are two very different cases. Avera Mengistu, as you said, is an Israeli who wandered into Gaza about 11 years ago. He wandered through agricultural fields that reached to the very border. And then he was captured and held by Hamas. Hamas never returned him, and also for years didn't confirm that he was in Gaza. From his family's point of view, he had simply vanished. He was, at that time, 28 years old. He was known to have instability, to have mental health challenges. The family launched its own investigation. They found out that they thought there were indications he was in Gaza, but it wasn't that long ago that the first proof of life for Avera Mengistu came, and his family obviously is elated today to know that he's alive and he's already back in Israel. He's now heading to the Israeli military base where family members are waiting for him. Tal Shoham, the other man released, who looked very gaunt, he's a 40-year-old tech guy from central Israel. He had taken his family for a long weekend in the south of the country where his in-laws lived in a village called Be'eri. That weekend of October 7th, 2023, he, his wife, and his two daughters were taken hostage separately. They were separated. The wife and daughters were released in the November 2023 exchange at the very end of that month, so after some 50 and some odd days of captivity. But Tal Shoham has been held now for more than 500 days, since October 7th of that year, and there was no sign of life from him. No one knew if he was alive or dead. His name was included on the list of hostages to be released in phase one of this ceasefire deal, but again, it wasn't certain that he was alive until Hamas put him on the list just 2 days ago. So there is immense relief, and his family has already issued a statement expressing their joy and gratitude at seeing him free, but emphasizing, as all of the hostages' families are, that the task will not be complete until all the hostages are home.
And on that note, Noga, how realistic is that, and how close are we to maybe seeing some progress to reaching that point?
Very hard to answer. In a kind of off-the-cuff comment yesterday, President Trump said that Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to return to war, which is what so many Israelis here fear, that because he does not believe a formal end to the war, a resolution decreeing the end of the war, and the withdrawal of all Israeli troops from Gaza, which are required in phase two, because Netanyahu does not believe he can get that through his cabinet and fears that his coalition government could be toppled if he agrees to those conditions, there are great fears that he is actually facing or even desiring a return to war. The other possibilities being discussed here is that his crony, Minister for Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, who has been dispatched to Washington to hold these discussions, surprisingly, since they're mostly being held in Doha, but who's gone to meet the Trump team, there's a chance that they may be looking for a way to finesse the requirements of phase two. Instead of calling it a formal end to the war, perhaps they would find a way to call it an extended ceasefire. They're trying to see if there are ways that Netanyahu will find the conditions that are in the framework for phase two more palatable to him. And the same, it has to be said, goes for Hamas. We've seen in the last few days Hamas engaged in some very cynical staging and spectacle making with the dead bodies. There are still 4 more bodies that they have to release in phase one next Thursday. And then for phase two, Hamas will have to relinquish all the hostages, and thus almost all its remaining leverage over Israel. That is quite something for it to decide, although it says it is prepared to do so. The other thing is that not just Israel at this point, the United States and even the Arab countries that have served as mediators on behalf of Hamas are demanding that Hamas relinquish power. So we're hearing talk that Hamas could become something like what the diminished version of Hezbollah is at this moment in Lebanon. Not an active part of the government, but still an existing entity of some sort.
Yeah, Noga, as you point out, Hamas obviously very criticized for the way it handled the bodies of those hostages this week. Now, the thing we've seen time again with these exchanges is how carefully planned and orchestrated these exchanges are. If viewers on our screen can see the scene in Nusayrat, where many people are standing by to watch this, the Hamas militants with their guns and their trucks awaiting presumably the arrival of the Red Cross there before these 4 men will be released later today. What has Hamas been trying to signal, at least communicate with the way it's conducting these exchanges? Clearly it wants to seem like it is organized, like it is powerful, and like it should have a say in whatever the future is in Gaza.
That's right. Hamas is trying to stage victory shots, in fact, using these hostages, some of which we've seen has been in pretty bad shape, using them as trophies of war. And it's been interesting to see the succession of these days. We're now on the 6th exchange, or maybe even the 7th exchange, if I'm not mistaken. And initially, Western media just transmitted Hamas's images because there were no other images to transmit. I still remember that first Saturday with 3 Israeli young women who were released through a kind of, throngs and really a braying mob that they were forced to walk through. We weren't clear what to do with those images or how to portray them. And for Hamas, this was perceived at that time as a successful management of the image. That the perception was that they had successfully transmitted to the Arab world, we won. We're still in power, we're armed, and we're controlling the narrative. This has become much more shaky over the past few weeks, especially as Israeli hostages began to be released in clearly very, very poor condition. And then with the botched release of these 4 dead, actually turned out to be 5 bodies, but 4 on Thursday, one of which was a mistaken cadaver, as difficult as that sounds to imagine. And these images of 2 very, very small children on these adult-sized coffins with their names mistransposed. The Hamas has come under increasing pressure also from Qatar and from the Arab world, basically to cut it out.
All right, Noga. Thank you very much, Noga Tarnopolsky.